Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Away Games. This is November 14th, Wednesday, November 14th, if you are downloading on the day it's released. And usually we're hosted by Kevin McCaffrey, who is me, so you probably know that, unless you're starting a Cubs podcast now for the first time, which if so, welcome. Weird time to do it, November 14th, not really the hottest time of the baseball year. But usually we are also hosted by Adam Mamawala. Adam and I both two comedians living in New York, and one thing when you are two comedians hosting a baseball podcast is you're not often in the same place because we're traveling around a lot. And as I'm recording this, I am in Minnesota, and the reason Adam is not here is because he's in Los Angeles right now. So usually when Adam or I has not been here before, we've had a pinch hitter. We've had my brother Joe show up. We've had Ken Shildt, another baseball Cubs expert, show up. But today, guess what? Flying solo, baby. Our first solo one-man Away Games podcast. Could hardly be more Away Games than to just be one person by themselves talking. But that's what we're doing today because, the Ricketts cut the budget, and this is what we can do. So I'm going to go through what's happening with the Cubs right now. First of all, I guess, before getting into that, the big baseball news this week, I would say the biggest is probably that the Astros, on top of being more hateable with every day from just the culture of that front office, and a lot of fun players on that team. But I think Brandon Taubman and his whole deal, basically shouting pro Osuna profanity at a woman wearing a domestic violence awareness pin. That got everyone rooting for the Nationals. Cool, right? Well, it turns out the Astros have also been particular cheaters, it seems like. A report came out this week in The Athletic showing that the Astros had been cheating in a very advanced way. And, the Astros have surpassed the Cubs as a forward-thinking front office, and apparently that also includes cheating. They're very good at it. In 2017, apparently they were they had a camera set up specifically so that they could catch the catcher's signs, and they had people. This part doesn't seem terribly technologically advanced. They had somebody just watching on a secret monitor in a hallway next to a trash can. That's your forward-thinking cheating Astros. So that's what happened, and basically they would decode the catcher's signs, and to signal certain pitches, change-ups, breaking balls, whatever, they would pound on the trash can, which is a perfect image of what the Astros front office is. They are just a bunch of fucking trash cans, turns out. And for me, this sort of cheating, and they don't have, it doesn't seem like there's evidence of them cheating in the exact same way since 2017, although you figure maybe they have gotten a little more advanced about it, as opposed to just being, less cheating, less of a bunch of cheaters. It doesn't seem like that's the way the Astros would go. But yeah, apparently this was going on through 2017 quite a bit. And Mike Fiers, former Astros pitcher, put his name behind it. He came out and talked about it and said that he warned the teams he was on since he pitched with the Astros, where he did throw a no-hitter, I believe, in that stadium. He has warned his teams with the A's and the Tigers about that, basically saying that he felt like it went above and beyond just typical sign stealing, which I think that does seem like a good place to draw the line. If you're setting up your own secret camera in center field, that's straight up cheating. Because it's not like the away team gets a chance to set up their own camera in your park, which would be a fun element if they did. If they got to send a scout ahead of time and everyone got their own secret camera, okay, cool. But that is clearly not the case. And it seemed obviously the Astros weren't the only ones cheating like this. The Red Sox were disciplined, I believe that same year in 2017. No team has been disciplined for this kind of cheating since then. But the Red Sox were then. There had been, and it seems like multiple players said that one of the teams thought to do this the most, unsurprisingly, would be the Milwaukee Brewers. And if you've looked at Christian Yelich's home road splits, that makes a lot of sense. Do it right now if you haven't. Christian Yelich, amazing player. Look at his home road splits and tell me what that looks like. Maybe he just loves sausage, but it seems like they be cheating. So that's the big national news before we get into Cubs stuff. The other national stuff is some awards being given out this week. The rookies of the year were both obvious calls. Alonso in the NL with the Mets, who just seems like a cool guy. Like there was a package that MLB put together where they had a bunch of his teammates congratulating him on being named rookie of the year. And that was a fun thing to see. And then Yordan Alvarez with the Astros. So he had a whole shit ton of home runs in half a year, and maybe he didn't even know what some of those pitches would be ahead of time. Maybe 2 or 3 times. They weren't cheating there for him to get that. I do think the funniest award, given how the postseason played out, and reminder that all the awards given out in the postseason are only based on the regular season, but Manager of the Year Mike Shildt of the Cardinals, Mr. Shildt the Bed. Him, he said fuck 1 million times in a big tough guy talk after the Cardinals won their first series, and then got his ass swept out of the playoffs. That's your National League Manager of the Year. So congratulations to Mike fucking getting fucking swept Shildt for winning that. That's the funniest award so far. All right, let's get to Cubs news going on right now. I don't know if we want to start with the biggest. It's like the biggest Cubs news this week is not even news so much. It's just talk about possible trades, which is it's been a lot of talk about would the Cubs possibly take a step back so they could extend their window. And I think in a couple of weeks ago, we had guys in the various people, I think Theo, Ricketts, various people talking about how the Cubs at this point shouldn't really be talking about windows. It should be a team of this current talent and of the budget they have and the market they have. It shouldn't be windows. It should be consistent contending for many years now. But there's been a lot of talk about how the Cubs might deal from their core to try to set themselves up for stronger teams going forward beyond 2020. Which, if you're me, is insanely infuriating. Thinking long term is great, but this year you have the Brewers who've already had to take some surprising cost cutting measures. They did not pick up Eric Thames, who's been very useful for them and did not cost a lot of money. It seems like they're not going to be able to really load up. You have the Cardinals who knows if they mean it or not, but are talking about how they're already maxed out on their baseball budget. They did bring back Adam Wainwright, so congratulations. That'll be fun to see him pitching as a 53-year-old in St. Louis this upcoming year. That's very cool. Good for him. But I feel like if you're not taking full advantage of this year, 2020, that is inexcusable. And how the Cubs would not be fully taking advantage of this year would be possibly if they trade one of the main parts of this lineup, which the main people being mentioned, of course, are Chris Bryant and Willson Contreras. There was a piece in The Athletic, I think it was by John Greenberg, basically talking about how Chris Bryant has still somehow been underrated by this team. It's a very good piece about how trading Bryant right now would not make any sense for a team that is saying it is a World Series contender. And obviously this is a really tough time of year to talk about possible deals and to have opinions on trades, because it's literally impossible to have an opinion on something without knowing the other side of it. If you tell me the Cubs are dealing Chris Bryant, the remaining 2 years of Chris Bryant's deal for the remaining 2 years of Francisco Lindor's deal, okay, fine, let's talk about it. But also, that wouldn't make sense for either side, really. So it doesn't seem like that's the kind of deal we'd be talking about. But the Cubs can afford Chris Bryant, and what are the chances you get someone back or multiple someones back that give you a better chance to win the World Series this year than Chris Bryant, who at his best is a top 10 player in the league. Basically zero, I think. And this piece makes a very good case of that, so I won't recap the whole thing. But I do think that is the right opinion. I think it seems like the consensus across the board is that Willson Contreras might be the most likely to be dealt from the core here. And if you look at Willson Contreras' new profile pic, I don't know, it seems like maybe Willson thinks that too. If you haven't seen, check out Willson's new Twitter profile pic. It is him not really in a Cubs jersey. It's him at the All-Star game. And Willson, I think, I think it would be easy with a lot of players to read too much into their social media presence and what their latest post means about what they've heard or about what they're feeling. But one of the reasons I love Willson Contreras so much, besides the fact that he's inarguably a top 3 catcher in the league offensively, at least. I mean, with Sanchez and Real Muto, and that's about it. And you can put Grandal up there too, but Wilson's been above him offensively for sure. One of the reasons I love Willson Contreras so much is because of how emotional he is, because of what a sort of standout, fiery, emotional guy he is. So, of everyone to read into whose social media posts you could read into, I do think reading into Willson Contreras' post could actually tell you something. And he posted a new profile pic that is him in his All-Star jersey. So if you're me, if I'm Willson Contreras there, that could be a little bit of being like, hey, FYI, I'm fucking good. I've been an All-Star 2 years in a row, and I've deserved it both of those years. And it's showing him not fully in a Cubs jersey, being like, you know what, if you don't want me, you know what team I am on? The All-Star team. You know what team I'm going to be on again next year? Probably the All-Star team. And you look at basically why it would make sense to deal Willson Contreras. And you can talk me into a deal that might make sense if you're basically saying, all right, Victor Caratini, high-end backup. He grades out well defensively. Offensively, he, by some metrics, the dude was a top 10 offensive catcher. So the Cubs, look at the numbers, and Caratini and Contreras, no team has had a better offensive combination behind the plate last year. And he grades out fine defensively. So you tell me, all right, he can pick up a lot of the slack. Sure, he's still not in Willson Contreras' league offensively. He's still not in Contreras' league as an arm behind the plate. Sure, he's a better framer than Willson because everyone is, basically. Sure, great. He's not. Wilson's number one problem being that he's not good at making umpires do their job, which it sucks that is such a big deal, but it is. If you tell me the Cubs trade 3 years of control of Willson Contreras and they replace him with a Yasmani Grandal, and then we have Victor Caratini behind him, and then you just cross your fingers and hope that Miguel Amaya is the prospect that we hope he is coming up, who, by the way, isn't going to be ready for another year or two. Okay, you can kind of talk me into that. But do we believe that the Cubs are going to spend what it takes to sign a Yasmani Grandal to replace Willson Contreras? I find that pretty hard to believe. And it's also hard for me to believe that the Cubs would get enough value back for Contreras to make giving away such an advantage in your lineup like that. Now, it seems like the trade partner that might be making the most sense based on what they're saying publicly, it seems like the Padres are looking for offense behind the plate, and they want someone who can bat from the left side and switch hitting outfielder, which you hear that, and basically it's like, all right, well, that's Willson Contreras, helps you offensively behind the plate, and Ian Happ helps you as a switch hitter in the outfield. So the Cubs have two people who can match up with the Padres that way, but the Padres are doing that so they can try to compete now, which is what the Cubs should be doing. So there are prospects that certainly you'd be interested in from the Padres, but Urias, their second baseman, who has been much better in the minors than he has been in the majors so far. That's a guy I like. Big-time contact bat as a second baseman. He also plays some shortstop. So, yeah, that's a guy you'd like to get your hands on. But if you're swapping Contreras for that, that's a loss. That is giving away too much value. So, again, it's hard to see how a deal would match up there that actually would make sense for the Cubs. But that's the part of the year we're in right now, where basically we're just talking about trades without any idea of who's coming back. All we know now is that it's the kind of thing where Bryant and Contreras are being talked about as the most likely to leave. And I think it's easy to fall in love with the guys you know best, but I have a very tough time believing it makes baseball sense for this year to deal either of those guys off this team. So I guess we'll see. Theo did come out and say that he did say that basically every trade rumor you hear this offseason, take with more than a grain of salt, take it with a mouthful of salt, he said, which A, is gross, and B, is kind of bullshit, because he also has hinted around the things that we've talked about the Cubs possibly taking a step back this year, looking like they're taking a step back this year to take 2 steps forward in the coming years, which, if you're doing that, these are the trades that we're talking about. Theo also talked about how it would help if the Cubs were able to extend some of the players on the team. And I'll read you a quote from Theo Epstein. He said, "The bottom line is we haven't been able to sign a lot of our key players to contract extensions, so we have to face that reality. You can't operate in a theoretical world where a few more of these guys have signed. But Hendricks signed, obviously Rizzo signed, and that extends their years of club control, gives us a little more freedom and flexibility." Theo continued to say, "If we could pull that off with another couple guys, it would certainly put us in a better position. We've certainly been trying, and it hasn't happened yet. No ill will, it takes 2 sides to think a deal makes sense for it to happen. We'll see if anything comes of those talks, or if there will even be significant talks." End quote. This I find annoying. When Theo says, "We've been trying to extend guys and it hasn't happened yet," when he says, "We'll see if anything comes of those talks, or if there will even be significant talks," Theo, you get to make sure that there are significant talks. And you are half of the deal maker. He talks about these deals would have to make sense for both sides. Yeah, okay. Well, you're going to have to offer these players, at least 1 or 2 of these players, a deal that makes some fucking sense to get them to sign. And yes, absolutely, it would help it would be a lot easier to know where it made sense to deal from if you had 1 or more of these guys locked up. If you had a Javi Baez locked up to an extension, if you extended Bryant, or even a Contreras, if you extended 1 or 2 of these guys, it would give you a lot of clarity going into your next window. And that, to me, is how I would like to see this team try to clarify going beyond this year. More so than just dealing one of these core players for younger guys who are more controllable for more years, yada, yada. Find who you want to spend the money on, the money that your team has, and let's extend one of these guys this season. I do think this offseason, if the Cubs begin the year without having extended anyone of the core, that would be a major failure by this front office. I think the Cubs need to start bringing more serious offers to the guys who they think might be open to extending. And again, that would, when we talk about that, we're mainly talking, Javi is the guy that people have talked about being most open to that, and most likely to extend. But also, I don't really know why we think that. I don't know. I mean, I understand that we think Bryant, with the grievance he has about his service time manipulation, and just being with Scott Boras and being a guy who could get in the, who you figure at least is getting $200 million plus in his next deal. I understand thinking he's the least likely, although I would like to see them make a serious offer and see how close they could get. But I don't know why we assume Javi would be the easiest guy to extend either. But bottom line, I think it would be a failure to not get one of those guys extended this offseason. I guess the last thing to cover right now, it's not this isn't a terribly serious piece of business, but it was funny to see a little bit this morning. Watching Brett Taylor at Bleacher Nation write it up, or it might have been Michael Cerami, but whatever. It was on Bleacher Nation. The qualifiers they put up as if they were the ones making this choice, just knowing how angry people would be. But it looks like the Cubs are talking about bringing Brandon Morrow, who technically is not dead, believe it or not, talking about bringing Brandon Morrow back on a minor league deal. The key words there being minor league deal. Like, of course, Brandon Morrow, he hasn't pitched since the first half of the year, which he was very good. Not last year, the year before that. He was largely a waste of money. He just had a million problems. I think forearm, elbow, nerve issues, which is not good. But that said, it is a high-end guy, or if the Cubs can get him on a minor league deal for no money, get him in. I mean, if you're talking about signing Brandon Morrow on a minor league deal, if you can just get him to pitch another month, pumping 100 and as a high-end reliever before he shuts down again, that's fine. That seems like a fine gamble to take. So it seems like that is possibly in the works here. Is talking about possibly bringing Brandon Morrow back on a much smaller minor league deal. And that really tells you almost all you need to know about how quiet it is right now, news-wise. It would be really fun if any free agents were at all close to signing, which that is allowed at this point of the season. And in the NBA, everyone's signing immediately as soon as that free agent window opens. Baseball, it seems like we just go to sleep for a while. So yeah, that tells you basically all you need to know when Brandon Morrow possibly coming back on a minor league deal is pretty much the hottest rumor going on right now. So I'll keep this episode tight. I don't think there's anything else that really begs talking about. I guess the Cubs hired Andy Green as the bench coach, which is a little interesting because David Ross being a guy who's going to be a new manager who doesn't really have official coaching experience either. You'd think that guy would want a very experienced bench coach sitting next to him, someone who has a lot of managerial experience. Andy Green does have a lot of managerial experience, or some at least. He managed the Padres for 4 years. And weirdly, he and David Ross actually played together in the minors a little bit. But Andy Green is also still a young guy. This is a manager who was hired in his 30s. He managed for 4 years with the Padres, and I think he's only 42 years old right now. So he does have more experience than David Ross as a manager for sure. And I guess that's mainly what you're looking for. But it's interesting that it is, I'd have to think this is just about the youngest combination of manager and bench coach. And outside, maybe Houston's close with A.J. Hinch and runner-up for the Cubs job, Joe Espada, who now apparently was also runner-up job in San Francisco because Gabe Kapler got that job. Weird. That is a weird hire in San Francisco. Honestly, unless it's just... if the Cubs had hired Gabe Kapler over Joe Espada, I'd be fucking livid. So apologies to San Francisco fans who I'd imagine cannot be super psyched about the Kapler hire there. But yeah, Andy Green, new bench coach. I think I'm fine with it. I don't know a ton about Andy Green. He does have actual managerial experience, so that's good to bring to the table. And apparently buds with David Ross. They've at least shared a lineup before. So that's it. We'll leave it there. That's all we got for this week. Next week there will be back. Whether it's me, whether it's Adam, whether it's whether it's both. I will say next week we're going to have 2 people on this podcast again. But until then, follow us at Away Games Pod on Twitter, at Away Games Pod on Instagram. And that'll do it for this week on Away Games. We'll be back together next week.